The presidential campaign took another wild turn last week with the release of a recording of Republican candidate Donald Trump discussing his treatment of women and a very tense second presidential debate. Well, former Massachusetts State Senate Republican leader Brian Lees came in to talk about his own decision not to support Donald Trump and what's happening in the race.
First of all, Donald Trump won the Republican nomination fair and square, so no one can take that away from him. And he does have some people that are certainly feverish supporters sticking with him. Voting is a very personal thing, and I respect everybody's right to support and vote for who they would like. Unfortunately, in this race, I think both sides, it's gotten a little down and dirty. It's not, you're supposed to respect the office. You're supposed to respect your constituents. I don't know what's happened with both of these candidates and campaigns, but it is so important that you set an example for folks that if you're running for president of the United States, you respect others, you're going to be the president of the entire country, and it's just kind of gotten down in the gutter on certain things. I would not bite when somebody like Paul Ryan said something. Paul Ryan's got a right to do what he wants to do. Donald Trump has a right to do what he wants to do. But why you start to waste time and waste Twitter comments on stuff like that, I just don't get it.
It seems now like Trump people are going to go to the polls, Trump Republicans, whatever you want to say, vote Trump and nobody down below. That the Paul Ryan people are basically saying, let's save our majorities in Congress and our down ballot positions. They're going to go not vote for Trump at the top, but everybody below. You split that up, you can lose all the Republican races because in so many places in this country, there aren't enough people who call themselves Republicans or think that way to elect unless they're all working together and united and pulling a fair amount of independents. How worried are you about your party that you've revered?
Well, first of all, I'm not worried at all. You know, the rest, you go through bumps, and that has happened in the Democratic Party, happened in the Republican Party before, but I believe that the structure of the Republican Party will hold. As I have said many times on this show and others that I have been interviewed on, I don't think parties mean as much anymore. It's the individual. So I don't buy into this total pundit thing that no one's going to vote down ticket. If they like their own congressman, if they like their own state senator, they're going to vote for them. That doesn't mean they're either not going to support Donald Trump or support Donald Trump. But people ticket split now like you've never seen around this country. There are certain states that have Democratic United States senators that have never voted for a Democrat for president. So that was a down ballot, technically a down ballot vote at some point. I think that it's going to be very interesting, but it's important that people remember you represent your district first. You represent people in your state or your area first, parties a second or third. And you have to remember that. I never, even though I was minority leader and very proud of it and did certain things, if I had to break with my party, I did. If I had to break with a Republican governor, I did. And I think that's what these folks are doing.
Your old friend, former Governor Bill Weld. And you were at one point, you were about the only Western Massachusetts Republican supporting him because he was running in a primary in 1990. We're going back to against Steve Pearce, state representative, state house leader who was from Westfield. He's now running as the Libertarian candidate for vice president with another former Republican governor, Gary Johnson of New Mexico. What do you make of where your friend Bill Weld is now?
Well, first of all, when Weld ran against Steve Pearce, people said that was the end of the Republican Party. There was such a fight, and it was dog eat dog. I supported Bill Weld, and a lot of people around here were furious with me. But that's the way it is. You stand up for what you believe in. In this case, Bill Weld hasn't lost a step. I've seen him interviewed on several talk shows. He's still brilliant, but I have to say that the top of that ticket, even though I think an independent ticket is very intriguing, Gary Johnson some of his ideas are just a little bit out there. But he put his alliance with him, and I respect Weld, and he did what he did. I don't think they're going to get the percentage people think in the end, because I just think that some of Johnson's ideas are just so out of the mainstream. And Bill Weld publicly a few times has said, I don't agree with Gary Johnson on these points, and I respect him for it.
The Trump people now are complaining that they feel Speaker Paul Ryan, a lot of Republican office holders nationwide, have just written off Donald Trump. Well, what's your reaction to that? Do you think they have? Is it over for the top of the Republican ticket with a month to go?
No, I mean, I still think anything can happen. I mean, I think Trump has created some of this himself. He certainly didn't support a lot of things in the Republican Party. So for all of a sudden him now to say certain Republicans aren't supporting him, at the same time, he won the nomination. He is on the ticket. People have to make a decision what they're going to do. I respect everybody in voting because it's a very personal thing. However, I think, again, to start always pointing fingers. He wants to be president of the United States. In the end, Paul Ryan isn't on the ballot in most of the places, with the exception of his own congressional that he's running. Other folks aren't. John McCain's only on the ballot in Arizona. Don't get down in the weeds and start to point your finger at others. Talk about your ideas, what you want to do, less government, less taxes, and things on the international front. And I think Trump will do better than people think.
If Donald Trump loses by a fair margin, are he and his supporters washed out of the Republican Party? Does it go back to control folks like the more moderate conservatives, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, the Bush family, the more center-right Republicans? Or where's your party at after November 8th?
Well, I think the party is always going to be somewhat in the middle and middle to right. If he loses by any amount, it's a loss. In politics, one vote, you lose, and we saw that in the election with Bush in the past. But I don't think the party is dead. I think what the party has to find out is everyone has to work together. Let's go back to Ronald Reagan's term, the Big Tent. We'll have everybody in there. We may have some disagreements, but we're a party, and we want to move forward.
Brian Lees, thanks for coming in.
Happy to be here.